This week in Idaho, Moscow murder defense seeks to exclude DNA evidence, possible pay hikes, and new judges for the Idaho Supreme Court, and double dipping in the dilemma in Idaho's law enforcement. That and so much more. This is the Yokel Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you a quick overview of the news in Idaho for the last week. Glad to have you here today. Happy New Year's. Hopefully you are having a wonderful start to your new year. But speaking of a story that has been ongoing for a couple years now, Brian Kohberger's defense team is making a final push to exclude crucial evidence from his upcoming trial for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, or allegedly being the key part there. Specifically for the evidence that they're trying to exclude, the attorneys filed 10 briefs arguing that police conduct, lack of warrant specificity, and constitutional rights violations would disqualify key pieces of evidence. Specifically, they targeted DNA evidence obtained through investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG, claiming that it led to unlawful searches and seizures. The defense also contested the non-knock raid on Kohberger's parents' home, arguing it was unnecessary and inappropriate. But for the general takeaway of this, if successful, these motions could prevent prosecutors from preventing said evidence in the jury, potentially altering the course of this very high-profile case. It's one that has covered the news massively for the last couple months. It's been the main poster child of Idaho news. And speaking of the court system here with our second to first one, Idaho Supreme Court Chief Justice G. Richard Bevin has called for major changes to address the state's judicial crisis. In a bold move, Bevin proposed a nearly 30% increase in judicial pay and the addition of new judges in key areas. See, gotta argue high and then you can argue him down from there. Maybe he's trying some negotiating tactics there. The plan aims to tackle the state's low recruitment and retention rates, with Idaho currently ranking 48th nationally for general jurisdiction judges' pay, and last for Supreme Court justices. As for what the proposed change would include, it would raise the Supreme Court justice's salary to $215,000, a 27% increase, with other judicial positions receiving potential increases. The total cost of these reforms is estimated at $10 million for the next fiscal year. As for Bevin's response on this, he emphasized the urgency of the situation, stating that, quote, "We're on a bit of a precipice in maintaining our judicial quality and excellence." He highlighted the strain on the court system due to Idaho's rapid population growth. As we talked about last week, we topped over 2 million, with civil case filings jumping 30% last year. Interesting fact to keep for any social gatherings. As for concerns and worries about it, it is to depoliticize the process, setting judicial pay, so it's not some political thing where people are using it as a hot potato. Bevin suggested creating an independent commission to recommend salary changes, similar to the existing system for legislative compensation, which we've talked about many times as it's been adjusted or had some rather large numbers. This could replace the current annual legislative action requirement for judicial pay adjustments. In conclusion, bringing that all together, the proposal also includes adding new judicial positions in highly needed areas, such as Kootenai, Twin Falls, and Bonneville counties to address increased caseloads. And speaking about the more boots-on-the-ground part of the law, Idaho's law enforcement leaders are under fire for potentially exploiting a retirement loophole. Twin Falls Police Chief Craig Kingsbury, Nampa Police Chief Joe Huff, and Bonner County Sheriff Darrell Wheeler have retired and quickly returned to their positions, which has allowed them to collect both retirement benefits and full salaries. Now, the obvious question that comes up is, how is this even possible? This practice, dubbed double dipping, stems from a 2023 Idaho law permitting law enforcement officers to return to their work after a 30-day retirement period, while still receiving retirement benefits. As for why on earth this law was passed, its original intent was to address staffing shortages, but critics argue, and as we're seeing here, high-ranking officials are misusing it to boost their income. Wheeler's recent announcement of a temporary resignation to claim retirement benefits, as obviously with most of this and why we're talking about it, sparked some controversy, with former state Senator Scott Herndon questioning its legality due to Wheeler's guaranteed reemployment after winning re-election. Moving forward, the situation has ignited debate about the law's purpose and potential abuse and possible plans to remove it. And speaking of regulations and something that's probably great for our more well-aged people there, Idaho's new law regulating pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, took effect on January 1st, 2025, aiming to lower prescription drug costs and increase transparency in the pharmaceutical industry. Specifically, how it came about was House Bill 596, signed by Governor Brad Little in April of 2024, introduced significant changes to the PBM practices in the state. Specifically, it prohibits spread pricing, requiring PBMs to use pass-through pricing and charge healthcare plans the same amount they pay pharmacies for the medication. PBMs must now provide full disclosure of drug costs, fees, and markups, as well as report price increases and their reasons to the state. Granted, kind of getting a little bit their hands in the free market, but we'll see how it turns out here. The law also establishes network adequacy standards, preventing BPMs from mandating mail order delivery unless medications are unavailable through local in-network pharmacies. Additionally, PBMs must report changes in pharmacy reimbursement and fees to the Idaho Department of Insurance. Now, what does all that gobbledygook mean? The general takeaway is this reform comes amid growing national scrutiny of PBM practices, with several other states enacting similar legislation. The new requirement aims to make PBM operations more transparent and fair, potentially leading to lower prescription drug costs for Idaho residents. Which, if you've liked the first part of our show here, do us a favor and hit the like button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. Also, if you want to keep up with all of this content, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next midweek report or any of our other content. And speaking of the medical industry, St. Alphonsus Hospital in Nampa, Idaho, is gearing up for a major expansion to meet the growing healthcare needs of Canyon County, which we all know that when we've seen all the houses that are built everywhere. As the population explodes, the hospital plans to build a new 5-7-story tower, potentially adding 2 floors to the existing facility. The expansion will focus on increased outpatient services, including surgical imaging, oncology, and cardiology. Specifically, getting into it a little bit more deeply, the key features of the new tower will be an expanded natal intensive care unit, or NICU, increasing capacity from 4 to 10 beds. This will also allow more families to receive care closer to home, reducing the need to travel to Boise, which is always a blessing with the traffic we're having, especially with medical things that need to be done. Additionally, the expansion will enhance cardiology services by adding space to the existing suite and incorporating critical care beds in the new tower. In conclusion, the construction could begin as early as late 2025. We'll see how it all pans out because all these proposals have their own times. But it does mark a significant step in St. Alphonsus' commitment to providing accessible, high-quality healthcare to the rapidly growing Treasure Valley community. And a little bit of an update of a story we talked about last week, and coming back to the courts, don't shoot me here. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed its decision on the Beneficial Ownership Information, or BOI, reporting requirements, aiming to preserve the constitutional status quo. The court's goal was to allow for a thorough examination of the weighty substantive arguments presented by both parties before enforcing the Corporate Transparency Act, which has been passed. The effects of the reversal reinstates a nationwide injunction temporarily halting the enforcement of BOI reporting. The court's decision reflects a desire to balance the needs for financial transparency with constitutional concerns, recognizing the potential impact on businesses across the country. But moving forward, not too many details on that, but the Fifth Circuit's actions provide a reprieve for reporting companies, allowing them more time to prepare while legal proceedings unfold. However, it also creates some uncertainty for businesses and regulatory bodies, as they must be vigilant to see what's going on because it keeps changing week by week for further developments in this ongoing legal battle. And speaking of controversial moves, the Ada County Highway District Board of Commissioners approved a plan to widen Linder Road in Meridian. For those of you that may be new to the valley, the project spans 1.5 miles between West Pine Avenue and Ustick Road and will require the demolition of at least 35 homes. The $40 million expansion aims to create a 5-lane road with a landscaped medium, turn areas, and multi-use paths for pedestrians and cyclists. Seems pretty nice. Granted, why did the price tags have to be so high? Despite the significant impact on homeowners, many residents seem to have expressed support, actually, for this project during public hearings. You would think there would be more pushback, but there again, people are getting paid quite well. And on that, ACHD officials emphasized their commitment to fair compensation of affected property owners, considering nearby property values and allowing homeowners to present counter offers, which, if you're getting paid a very fat check there in Meridian, it's a big check anyways. With all that said, however, there are some commissioners that have voiced concerns about the project's cost, impact on the housing crisis, and the area's car-dependent growth. The plan's approval now shifts focus to the city of Meridian to determine funding priorities for this ambitious road expansion. And moving a little further west from Meridian and over in Canyon County, the Caldwell City Council has approved the Event Center District Sub-Area Master Plan, paving the way for a future development in the area near Canyon County Fairgrounds and Caldwell Night Rodeo. The plan, created by consulting firm Logan Simpson, envisions a softball fields capable of hosting tournaments, surrounded by supporting developments. As for some broader context, if you haven't been watching us regularly and are reporting on this, the decision came after months of discussion and public input, with the plan receiving approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission in October. The final vote was 4-2, with some council members expressing skepticism about the need for softball fields. As for what the plan entails, its focus shifted from an initial proposed amphitheater to a sports facility due to community feedback and practical considerations. While the softball field concept is central to the plan, it also includes alternative ideas to allow for flexibility in future developments. The approved plan is intended to guide future growth and facilitate public-private partnerships in the area, rather than providing a rigid blueprint. As Caldwell continues to grow like everywhere here in the Treasure Valley, this plan will hopefully serve as a framework for enhancing the city's events and entertainment. And staying with Caldwell here, and a story we've also probably talked about back in October, the Caldwell School District in Idaho has approved changes allowing for security officers to carry rifles, tasers, and pepper spray on school grounds. The decision came after the district switched from school resource officers to private security due to budget cuts following a failed levy. Would you look at that? Maybe we're prioritizing the more efficient one. I don't know. The board voted 2-1 to approve the measure, with 2 members abstaining, so they didn't vote at all. I wonder what the reason was for that. But the policy itself aims to enhance security measures and provide officers with intermediate force options. Eric Phillips, the director of student safety and emergency operations, emphasized the need for a variety of levels of response to potential threats. Security officers must receive proper certification, however, and training to carry tasers or pepper spray. Not everyone gets it. With the rifles being stored in locked safes, that way kids can't get at them or do shenanigans because teenagers. But moving forward, Jessica Watts, the district's communication director, stressed that students and staff safety is top priority. The district will also be adding a school resource officer, funded by a state grant, so you don't need to worry about the taxes there per se at the local level, who will primarily serve the Caldwell High School, but can assist at other schools as needed. And speaking of local cities and going up north, in December of 2024, Kootenai County, Idaho expanded its automatic license plate recognition, or ALPR program, transitioning from a pilot to a 1-year contract with Motorola. The decision, approved in a 2-1 vote by the Board of Commissioners, sparked heated debate between Sheriff Bob Norris and Commissioner Lisa Duncan. As for the lead up to this, for someone that's not up there in Kootenai County, the expansion equipped 48 marked sheriff vehicles with ALPR capabilities, raising concerns about privacy and civil liberties, which, they are just recording what's out there in public, but that's a different thing. Sheriff Norris defended the technology, citing its 16-year history in the county and emphasizing data protection measures. He stressed that no registered owner data is collected and federal access requires a warrant, so you don't have to worry about the feds, in theory, getting into it. As for the pushback part of it, Commissioner Duncan, initially supportive of the 2019 pilot program, now expresses some reservations. She's called for privacy reviews and guarantees on data handling, which she got the guarantee there. The controversy culminated in a public exchange, with Norris accusing Duncan of approving the technology without a follow-up, while Duncan questioned the transparency of the program's policies. But moving forward, the debate does highlight the complex balance between law enforcement needs and privacy concerns, and just the general public's understanding of what the definition legally is of privacy. And speaking of the wonderful, great outdoors that you have plenty of up north there, in a landmark agreement, Trust for Public Land, Stimson Lumber Company, and the Idaho Department of Lands has joined forces to protect 10,846 acres of working forest in Bonner and Boundary County, which, if the mention of Boundary County doesn't tell you where this is at, it's up there at the very top of Idaho. This conservation easement ensures that the land will remain undeveloped and continue to support the local timber industry. As for what that protection looks like, it includes property near Lake Pendere and Ferget State Park, as well as forest land south of Bonner's Ferry. This agreement not only preserves the land for sustainable forestry, but also safeguards wildlife habitats and maintains public access for recreation, just not when they're cutting trees down for obvious reasons. Funded by a $7.7 million from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, this easement marks Stimson Lumber Company's third such agreement in northern Idaho, bringing their total conserved acreage to over 35,000. In conclusion, the partnership between public and private entities demonstrates a shared commitment to balancing economic interest with environmental conservation. As Trust for Public Land project manager Sam McSherry noted, this agreement will provide long-term benefits for local communities, supporting jobs in logging and forest products while preserving the area's natural character for future generations. And speaking of land trusts, and going back over to eastern Idaho, the Teton Regional Land Trust, or TRLT, in Driggs, Idaho, has been a guardian of eastern Idaho's natural spaces, agricultural lands, and wildlife habitats for decades. Through voluntary conservation easements, TRLT has protected over 40,000 acres of land. Now they are embarking on a new mission, helping landowners with succession plans for their agricultural properties. How exactly will that help, and what is that? Well, with nearly a third of the U.S. agricultural land expected to change hands in the next 20 years, TRLT recognizes the urgent need to keep these lands in working hands. In 2023, they received a 4-year grant from the American Farmland Trust to support this initiative. Linda Hansen, who oversees the farm succession program at TRLT, emphasized their role as a resource for the community, saying, quote, "We strongly believe that protection of natural values and resources of eastern Idaho depends on the viability of farming and ranching here." End quote. But bringing that all together, TRLT aims to guide landowners towards creating their own succession plans, ensuring the preservation of eastern Idaho's agricultural heritage for generations to come. Which, if you had no idea these stories were going on, and you think you know some friends or family members that should know about this, please don't hesitate to share this episode. Your shares help us keep people connected and engaged in our beautiful state. And speaking of the great environment here, we've got a list of them here, I guess some New Year resolutions to the environment. The Nez Perce tribe have been awarded a $1.9 million grant to restore Leggett Creek, an area near an abandoned hydraulic mine here in Idaho. Specifically for the project, it is part of the American Beautiful Challenge, which aims to revitalize 22 acres of land, not a huge aim, and improve over 23 miles of upstream habitat for steelhead, chinook salmon, and bull trout. The tribe will focus on reducing sediment delivery in crucial areas and stabilizing eroded slopes by planting native vegetation. The grant is one of 61 awarded, totaling about $122.4 million, distributed to various states, tribal nations, and territories. This initiative, launched by the Biden administration in 2021, no shocker there, seeks to conserve 30% of U.S. land and waters by 2030, emphasizing local land and collaborative conservation efforts. And speaking of another thing with the federal government, but this time actually not Biden, the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act, big giant one there, failed to resecure authorization in the U.S. House of Representatives, leading to rural communities in Idaho and 41 states plus Puerto Rico, facing significant funding cuts in 2025. As for why it didn't pass and what exactly this act is that you probably never heard of, The bipartisan bill, which has provided funding for schools, roads, and conservation efforts since 2000, was unanimously approved by the Senate, but stalled in the House due to disagreements over funding mechanisms. It's probably part of that really big funding thing that had some bloat in it. As for the impact, it will particularly affect western states, with Oregon set to lose nearly $80 million in annual funding. Idaho Senator Mike Crapo and Oregon Senator Rod Widening, who co-authored the original bill, expressed frustration at the failure to pass this legislation. Some have argued that the program has been a lifeline for rural communities affected by reduced timber harvesting on federal lands. That's a different issue, federal government. Also arguing that it supports essential services like education, infrastructure, and fire suppression. But putting that all together and what that all means, because, the swamp in DC, as rural communities adjust to the reduced funding, some lawmakers have committed to continuing to push for reauthorization in the coming year. The lapse in funding highlights the ongoing challenge faced by areas with significant federal land presence, where the Fed gets a little bit more of a say about it, and it might affect the community unduly, and underscores the importance of developing local funding for rural economies so that their sustainability is not tied to the federal government. And speaking of rules and regulations, I swear this is the last one to do with the courts and stuff here. Idaho's new public defense system is facing a crisis, according to the ACLU of Idaho. In an emergency motion filed by the Idaho Supreme Court, the organization claims that the system has, quote, rapidly deteriorated, end quote, since its consolidation in October of 2024. As for what that deterioration is, if you haven't been keeping up with it, there's been a mass resignation of public defenders has led to a shortage, leaving many defendants without legal representation for weeks or months. The ACLU is urging the court to intervene by ordering the release of indigent defendants who have not communicated with an attorney within 7 days of appointment. A little bit of some objections there, or have not been present at crucial hearings. Also, a little bit of an objection there. The motion cites examples of defendants appearing in court without counsel and struggling to get information about their assigned attorneys. This crisis stems from issues such as inadequate pay, budget constraints, and concerns about political influence in the new system. The ACLU argues that immediate action is necessary to prevent further violations of defendants' constitutional rights to legal representation. And coming to our last story here, and getting out of the stuffy courtroom because we've had a lot of those in this week's episode. In a stunning display of winter prowess, 2 of Idaho's ski areas have captured national acclaim in the Newsweek Reader Choice Awards. Good on them. Specifically, Bogus Basin Mountain Recreational Area clinched the coveted first place spot, with the Sun Valley Resort securing an impressive 4th place. Specifically looking at the awards, Bogus Basin's victory was particularly sweet, with spokesperson Susan Sod expressing humble pride at being recognized alongside prestigious national destinations. Not content with just a top ski resort ranking, Bogus Basin also snagged the 7th position in the snow tubing park category, with Silver Mountain Resort from northern Idaho taking position number 10. Putting it all together, competing against renowned resorts from Utah, Colorado, California, and New York, our Idaho mountains have definitely proved that they offer world-class winter experiences, as many of you all know and have experienced and enjoy. The achievement highlights our state's growing reputation as a premier skiing destination, celebrating Idaho's natural beauty and exceptional recreational opportunities, which many of you probably moved here just for that. We love it so much. We love to be outdoors a ton. And speaking of that, I'm going to be heading outside here shortly as well. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you like the midweek report, please make sure to check out our other content. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.